Poor girl got into the millionaire CEO's car thinking it was an Uber and won his heart. Hey there, I'm Alex, your guide through today's extraordinary tale on Hearts of Crime. What you're about to witness is a story of passion and danger that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Trust me, when I say the twist at the end will leave you absolutely speechless. If you enjoy these forbidden love stories, please hit that like button and drop a comment below sharing your thoughts. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss our daily uploads of these incredible stories. Stay with me until the very end. I promise the conclusion will shock you in ways you can't imagine. So sit back, relax, and enjoy today's episode. Have a wonderful day, and may God bless you and your family. Rain poured down mercilessly over the city streets as Penny Garcia huddled under the small awning of the coffee shop, clutching her phone and staring desperately at the screen. Late again. The interview she spent weeks preparing for started in 20 minutes, and her bus had never shown up. In a moment of panic, she'd ordered an Uber she could barely afford. Come on, she muttered, watching the little car icon creep along the map. Her worn sneakers were already soaked, and water was beginning to seep through the thin material of her only professional outfit, a navy blue blazer she'd found at a thrift store. When a sleek black car pulled up to the curb, Penny didn't think twice. She dashed through the rain and yanked open the passenger door, collapsing into the leather seat with a relieved sigh. "Thank you so much for coming quickly. I'm desperate to get to—" Her words trailed off as she turned to face not an Uber driver, but a man in an impeccably tailored suit, his startled expression quickly turning to irritation. "Who the hell are you, and what are you doing in my car?" His voice was deep and commanding, his piercing blue eyes narrowing as they took in her dripping form. Penny froze, mortification washing over her. "Oh my God, you were not my Uber." "Clearly not." The man's jaw tightened. He had the kind of face that belonged in magazines, strong jawline, perfectly styled dark hair, with just a touch of silver at the temples, and those eyes that seemed to cut right through her. "I'm so sorry." Penny scrambled to gather her purse, her face burning with embarrassment. "It is just the rain, and I saw a black car, and I have this interview, and I'm already late." "Get out." His tone left no room for argument. Penny reached for the door handle, then hesitated, looking out at the downpour. "Look, I know this is crazy, but could you possibly give me a ride? It is just a few blocks to Lincoln Tower. I'll pay you whatever the Uber would have cost." The man let out an exasperated sigh. "I don't need your money." "Please," Penny said, desperation evident in her voice. "This interview is everything to me. I've been trying to get my foot in the door at a decent company for months." Something in his expression shifted slightly as he studied her. Her worn clothes, the determination in her eyes, the way she held herself with dignity despite her obvious embarrassment. "Lincoln Tower, you said?" he finally asked, his voice slightly less cold. "Yes, 14th floor, Goldcrest Enterprises." A strange look crossed his face. "Goldcrest. Do you know it?" Instead of answering, he pressed a button on his steering wheel. "James, change of plans. We are making a stop at Lincoln Tower first." "Right away, Mr. Roberts," came a voice through the speaker. The car pulled smoothly away from the curb, and Penny let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "Thank you," she said sincerely. "I am Penny, by the way. Penny Garcia." "Maxwell Roberts," he replied stiffly, not offering his hand. The name tickled something in Penny's memory, but she couldn't place it. She was too focused on mentally reviewing her interview preparation. "So what position are you interviewing for at Goldcrest?" Maxwell asked after a moment of silence, his tone carefully neutral. "Administrative assistant in the marketing department," Penny replied. "Nothing glamorous, but it pays better than waiting tables and has actual benefits." "And what qualifies you for this position?" His question had an odd intensity to it. Penny laughed nervously. "Well, I have a business degree for starters. Graduated with honors, though that was a while back." She twisted her hands in her lap. "I've been working 3 jobs since my mum got sick. Haven had much time to build a career." Maxwell's expression remained unreadable, but something flickered in his eyes. "I see. What about you?" Penny asked, trying to make polite conversation. "What do you do?" Before he could answer, The car pulled up to Lincoln Tower and Penny glanced at her phone. "I've still got 5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Roberts. You were a lifesaver." As she reached for the door, Maxwell stopped her with a question. "Do you know anything about Goldcrest Enterprises, Ms. Garcia?" Penny shrugged. "Big investment firm. Been around forever. Reputation for being cutthroat but successful. And that doesn't bother you? Working for a company with that kind of reputation? Honestly, at this point I just need the steady paycheck. My mom's medical bills aren't going to pay themselves." She gave him a small smile. "Thanks again for the ride." As she stepped out, Maxwell made a split-second decision. "Wait." He pulled a business card from his jacket pocket and handed it to her. "Call me after your interview. I'd like to hear how it went." Penny took the card automatically, tucking it into her purse without looking at it. "Sure," she said, though they both knew she probably wouldn't call. People like her didn't just call people who rode in cars like this. She dashed into the building, leaving Maxwell staring after her, an uncharacteristic uncertainty in his expression. The interview was a disaster. Penny sat on a bench in the lobby, trying not to cry. The woman who interviewed her, a sharp-eyed executive named Victoria, had seemed hostile from the moment Penny walked in. The questions were designed to trip her up, and nothing she said seemed to be the right answer. To make matters worse, when she finally escaped the interview room, she'd overheard Victoria speaking to someone. "Roberts wants us to fill these positions with people from top schools, not charity cases with gap-filled resumes." Roberts. The name clicked into place. Maxwell Roberts wasn't just some random businessman. He was Maxwell Roberts, CEO of Goldcrest Enterprises. She'd begged a ride from the head of the company she was interviewing with, and complained about the company to his face. Penny dropped her head into her hands, wondering if the day could possibly get any worse. "Ms. Garcia." She looked up to find Maxwell Roberts standing before her, his expression inscrutable. "Mr. Roberts," she said weakly. "Das, or should I say CEO Roberts?" A hint of a smile touched his lips. "You figured it out. A bit late." She stood up, straightening her damp blazer with as much dignity as she could muster. "I should apologize for what I said about your company." "No need." He studied her carefully. "How was the interview?" "Humiliating," Penny admitted. "Your HR director made it pretty clear I am not Goldcrest material. Victoria can be particular. That is one way to put it." Penny shouldered her bag. "Well, thank you again for the ride. I should go find the bus stop." "I have a better idea," Maxwell said, surprising himself as much as her. "Have lunch with me." Penny blinked. "Excuse me?" "Lunch. It is a meal people typically eat in the middle of the day." Despite everything, Penny found herself smiling at his dry humor. "I know what lunch is. I just don't understand why you'd be asking me." Maxwell wasn't entirely sure himself. There was something about this woman, her determination, her honesty, the way she defaced the morning disasters with resilience. It intrigued him. "Let us just say I'd like to continue our conversation from the car," he said, "unless you have another interview to get to." "No," Penny admitted. "Just a shift at the cafe starting at 4. "Perfect. I know a place." He gestured toward the door. Penny hesitated, every instinct telling her this was strange and potentially unwise. Yet something about Maxwell Roberts made her curious. And honestly, after the morning she had, what did she have to lose? "All right," she said finally, "but I'm paying for myself." Maxwell actually laughed at that, a deep, genuine sound that transformed his face. "We'll see about that." As they walked out together, neither realized they were being observed by Victoria from the upper floor, her expression calculating as she watched her boss leave with the woman she just rejected for employment. Neither of them could have predicted how that rainy morning would change both their lives forever, setting in motion a chain of events filled with secrets, danger, and an unexpected connection that would challenge everything they thought they knew about themselves and each other. The restaurant Maxwell chose wasn't what Penny expected. Instead of some exclusive establishment with a dress code that would make her feel hopelessly out of place, he led her to a small Italian bistro tucked away on a side street. It was elegant but unpretentious, with red checkered tablecloths, and the rich aroma of garlic and tomato sauce filling the air. "Lorenzo," Maxwell called out as they entered, and an older man with salt and pepper hair emerged from the kitchen, his face lighting up. "Max, it's been too long." Lorenzo embraced Maxwell warmly, then turned curious eyes to Penny. "And who is this lovely lady?" "This is Penny. Penny, this is Lorenzo. He makes the best carbonara in the city." "In the country," Lorenzo corrected with a wink at Penny. "Come, I have your usual table." As they followed Lorenzo to a secluded corner booth, Penny leaned closer to Maxwell. "You don't strike me as the red checkered tablecloth type." There's a lot you don't know about me," Maxwell replied, a hint of amusement in his voice. Once they were seated and Lorenzo had bustled away with promises of bringing his finest dishes, an awkward silence fell between them. Penny fidgeted with her napkin, suddenly acutely aware of her damp clothes and the vast differences between them. "So," she finally said, "is this where you tell me why the CEO of Goldcrest Enterprises is having lunch with someone who just bombed an interview at his company?" Maxwell studied her for a moment, his blue eyes thoughtful. "You intrigue me, Miss Garcia." "Penny," she corrected, "and that is not an answer." "Fair enough, Penny." He leaned back, his posture relaxing slightly. "When someone jumps into my car, insults my company, then manages to make me late for a meeting I've been dreading anyway, I find myself wanting to know more." "I didn't insult your company," Penny protested, then paused. "Well, not intentionally." The corner of Maxwell's mouth twitched. "Cutthroat but successful. Those were your words, I believe." "That's just reputation. I don't actually know what Goldcrest is like on the inside. And what if I told you the reputation is well earned?" Penny met his gaze steadily. "Then I'd wonder why a man who clearly has everything would choose to be known that way." That seemed to catch him off guard. Before he could respond, Lorenzo appeared with a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. Maxwell nodded and Lorenzo poured with a flourish before disappearing again. "I don't actually have everything," Maxwell said quietly once they were alone. Penny laughed, a short, disbelieving sound. "Right, just a luxury car with a driver, custom suits, and apparently your own personal table at charming hidden restaurants." "Things," Maxwell dismissed with a wave of his hand. "Just things. Things most people would kill for, Shah. Would you?" His question was sharp, direct. Penny considered it, taking a sip of wine to buy herself time. It was exquisite, unlike anything she'd ever tasted before. "No," she finally said. "Shani wouldn't kill for things, but I would work myself to exhaustion for stability, for knowing my mama's medical care is covered, for not having to choose between paying rent and buying groceries." Maxwell's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "Tell me about your mother." And somehow Penny found herself doing just that. She told him about how her mother had raised her alone after her father left when she was young, how her mom had worked multiple jobs to put Penny through college, and how she'd been diagnosed with a chronic illness just as Penny was finishing her degree. "So instead of launching your career, you started taking care of her," Maxwell concluded. Penny nodded. "I don't regret it. She sacrificed everything for me. But it means I am not exactly the perfect candidate on paper. Too many gaps, too many short-term jobs. Yet you still try, like today." "What else can I do?" Penny shrugged. "Give up? That is not an option." Their food arrived, a creamy carbonara for Maxwell and a rich mushroom risotto for Penny that Lorenzo insisted she try. The conversation shifted to lighter topics as they ate. Maxwell asked about her interests, and Penny found herself telling him about her love of photography, how she captured the city through her lens whenever she could steal a moment for herself. In turn, she learned that despite his imposing presence, Maxwell had a dry, understated sense of humor. He told stories about his early days building Goldcrest, and Penny found herself laughing at his impressions of stuffy investors and rival executives. "You were not what I expected," Penny admitted as they finished their meal. "Oh, and what did you expect?" "Someone colder. More robotic, I guess." Maxwell raised an eyebrow. "I assure you, in the boardroom, I am exactly as cold and robotic as rumors suggest." "I don't believe that," Penny said. "Not completely, anyway." A shadow crossed Maxwell's face. "Perhaps that is because I am not showing you that side of me." "Why not?" Before he could answer, his phone buzzed. Maxwell checked it, his expression immediately shifting into something harder, more businesslike. "I need to take this. Excuse me." He stepped away from the table, leaving Penny to wonder what she was doing here. This wasn't her world. Men like Maxwell Roberts didn't have lunch with women like her, unless they wanted something. But what could he possibly want from her? When Maxwell returned, his demeanor had changed. The relaxed man who had been sharing lunch with her was gone, replaced by the stern CEO she'd first met in the car. "I apologize, but I need to cut our lunch short. There is a situation at the office." "Of course," Penny said, reaching for her purse. "How much do I owe for the meal?" Maxwell waved her off. "Lorenzo would be offended if you tried to pay. Besides, I invited you." "Right." Penny stood, smoothing down her still not fully dry blazer. "Well, thank you for lunch, Mr. Roberts. It was unexpected." "Maxwell," he corrected, then hesitated. "I have a proposition for you." "A proposition?" Penny Escard immediately went up. Noticing her expression, Maxwell shook his head. "Not that kind of proposition. A job offer." "A job? At Goldcrest? But Victoria..." "Victoria reports to me, not the other way around." "So you are reoffering me the administrative position?" Penny asked, confusion evident in her voice. "No," Maxwell said, his blue eyes intense. "I'm offering you a position as my personal assistant." Penny stared at him, stunned. "Your personal assistant? But I don't have any experience with that kind of role. You have a business degree. You are clearly intelligent and resourceful. And most importantly, you were honest. You said what you thought about Goldcrest to my face, not knowing who I was. And most people would consider that a liability, not an asset," Penny pointed out. "I am not most people." Maxwell handed her a business card, a different one from earlier, with a private number scribbled on the back. "The position pays triple what the administrative role would have. Full benefits, including comprehensive health insurance, that would cover your mother." Penny's heart skipped a beat at that last part, but she forced herself to remain cautious. "Why me? There must be hundreds of qualified candidates who would kill for this job." "That's exactly why, Sas," Maxwell said. "They want it too badly. They say anything, do anything to please me. I don't need another yes person, Penny. I need someone who will tell me the truth, even when it is uncomfortable." The offer was tempting, almost too tempting, but something didn't add up. "You don't know me," Penny said slowly. "How can you trust me with a position like that after one lunch?" "Call it instinct. I've built my career on knowing who to trust." He checked his watch. "Think about it. Call me with your decision by tomorrow morning." Before Penny could say anything else, they were outside, and James was opening the car door. Maxwell paused before getting in. "One last thing," he said. "If you take the job, you should know. Not everyone at Goldcrest will welcome you. Victoria certainly won tea. It won tea be easy." "Nothing in my life has been easy," Penny replied. "That is not what scares me." "What does?" Penny looked him directly in the eyes. "The possibility that there is more to this offer than you were telling me." A flash of something, respect perhaps, crossed Maxwell's face. "Smart," he said quietly. "Keep that instinct. You'll need it if you say yes." Then he was gone, the black car merging smoothly into traffic, leaving Penny standing on the sidewalk with more questions than answers and a decision that could change her life forever. The cafe where Penny worked her evening shift was busier than usual, but her mind was elsewhere as she mechanically took orders and made drinks. The business card Maxwell had given her seemed to burn in her pocket. "Earth to Penny," her co-worker Lily called, waving a hand in front of her face. "You've been foaming that milk for about a year now." "Sorry," Penny said, quickly finishing the latte she was making. "Got distracted." "I'll say, what is going on with you today? First you rush off to that big interview, then you come in looking like you have seen a ghost." Penny hesitated. How could she possibly explain her day? "Oh, nothing much. Just jumped into a Millionaire's car by mistake. And now he has offered me a job that would solve all my financial problems, but it might be too good to be true." "It is nothing," she said instead. "Just tired." Lily looked skeptical, but dropped it as a new wave of customers entered. Near the end of her shift, Penny was wiping down tables when the bell above the door jingled. She looked up to see a woman in a sharp suit entering the cafe. It took her a moment to recognize Victoria from the Goldcrest interview. Penny froze, but Victoria walked straight to the counter, not even glancing in her direction. Had she not recognized Penny? It seemed unlikely. Victoria had spent a full 30 minutes scrutinizing her earlier that day. As Victoria collected her order and turned to leave, her eyes finally landed on Penny. A cold smile spread across her face. "Well, if it isn't to the girl who could not answer a simple question about market segmentation," she said, her voice carrying just enough for nearby customers to hear. Penny straightened, refusing to be intimidated. "Good evening, Miss Victoria. I hope your coffee is satisfactory." "It will do." Victoria took a step closer. "I saw you leaving with Maxwell Roberts today." "Mr. Roberts was kind enough to offer me lunch after my interview," Penny said carefully. Victoria's laugh was brittle. "Is that what they call it these days? Listen, girl, Maxwell Roberts doesn't do charity. If he is showing interest in you, it's because he wants something. Perhaps he just appreciates honesty." "Honesty?" Victoria's eyes narrowed. Goldcrest wasn't built on honesty. It was built on strategic decisions and necessary sacrifices. Max knows that better than anyone. "What are you implying?" Victoria took a sip of her coffee. "I'm not implying anything. I'm telling you to be careful. Max has spent years building a certain image for Goldcrest. He doesn't let anyone threaten that." Before Penny could respond, Victoria's phone rang. She answered it, turning away. "Victoria Harlow, yes sir, I understand. I'll handle it immediately." When she hung up, she gave Penny one last appraising look. "Stay in your lane, Ms. Garcia. That would be my advice." With that, she strode out, leaving Penny with a growing sense of unease. What had she gotten herself into? And more importantly, what should she do now? By the time she arrived home to the small apartment she shared with her mother, Penny had almost convinced herself to turn down Maxwell's offer. The conversation with Victoria had left her rattled, and her instincts were screaming that there was more going on than a simple job offer. Her mother was asleep when she entered, the soft whir of the oxygen machine a familiar background noise. Penny checked her medication, adjusted her blanket, and sat beside her bed for a moment. "I don't know what to do, Mom," she whispered to the quiet room. "It could change everything for us. No more worrying about insurance coverage or whether we can afford your medications." Her mother stirred slightly but didn't wake. On her nightstand sat a pile of medical bills, the red final notice stamps visible even in the dim light. Penny took out Maxwell's card, staring at the number scrawled on the back. Was she overthinking this? Maybe it was exactly what it appeared to be, an impulsive decision by a powerful man who had seen something in her that others had missed. Or maybe Victoria was right, and there was something else at play. Penny thought back to their lunch, to the way Maxwell had listened when she talked about her mother, to his comment about needing someone who would tell him the truth. There had been a sincerity in his eyes that didn't seem calculated. But then there was the way he changed after that phone call, the return of the cold, intimidating CEO. Which was the real Maxwell Roberts, and could she risk finding out? She looked again at her sleeping mother, at the bills, at the cramped apartment that was all they could afford despite Penny working 3 jobs. With a deep breath, Penny made her decision. She pulled out her phone and dialed the number. "Maxwell Roberts," his voice answered after 2 rings. "It's Penny Garcia," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "About your job offer." "Yes?" There was a hint of something in his tone, anticipation perhaps. "I'll take it, but on one condition." There was a pause. "I'm listening." "Complete transparency," Penny said firmly. "If I am going to work for you, I need to know exactly what I am getting into. No secrets, no hidden agendas." The silence stretched so long that Penny thought the call might have dropped. Finally, Maxwell spoke. "There are things about Goldcrest, about me, that aren't a tea for public knowledge," he said, his voice lowered. "There are things that happened in the past that shaped what the company is today. I'm not asking for corporate secrets," Penny clarified. "I'm asking for honesty between us. I need to know that whatever you'd bringing me into, you will be straight with me." Another silence. Then, "I can agree to that. With one amendment, there are some things I legally cannot disclose to anyone, Not even my personal assistant. Penny considered this. Fair enough. As long as you are not actively lying to me. Then we have a deal, Ms. Garcia, Maxwell said, his tone shifting to something more formal. Report to Goldcrest tomorrow morning at 9. Ask for me at reception. And Penny? Yes? Prepare yourself. This isn't going to be an easy road. As Penny hung up, she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just made a decision that would either save her and her mother, or lead them both into something far more complicated than she could imagine. Only time would tell which it would be. What she didn't know was that across town, Maxwell Roberts was staring out the window of his penthouse, wondering if he had just made the biggest mistake of his career by bringing Penny Garcia into his world. A world built on carefully constructed facades that one honest person might inadvertently bring crashing down. Penny's first day at Goldcrest Enterprises was nothing short of overwhelming. The moment she stepped through the gleaming glass doors of the Lincoln Tower, she felt the stares and whispers. Word had clearly spread about Maxwell Roberts' new personal assistant, the woman who had seemingly appeared from nowhere. Ms. Garcia, the receptionist greeted her with a tight smile. Mr. Roberts is expecting you. 52nd floor. The elevator ride felt endless. Penny smoothed down her outfit, the best she owned, though she knew it paled in comparison to the designer suits that populated the Goldcrest offices. She'd woken up at dawn to make sure her mother had everything she needed, arranging for a neighbor to check in during the day. When the elevator doors slid open, Victoria Harlow was waiting, arms crossed and expression cold. Ms. Garcia, how unexpected to see you here. Good morning, Ms. Harlow, Penny replied evenly. I believe Mr. Roberts is expecting me. Indeed he is. Victoria's smile didn't reach her eyes. Let me show you to his office. As they walked through the executive floor, Penny felt every eye on her. Victoria seemed to enjoy the attention, her heels clicking purposefully on the marble floor. You should know, Victoria said in a low voice, that Maxwell goes through personal assistants rather quickly. The last one lasted 3 months before she had a complete breakdown. I appreciate the warning, Penny replied, refusing to be intimidated. Victoria paused outside an imposing set of double doors. One last piece of advice, Ms. Garcia. Don't mistake professional interest for personal interest. That has a common error with Max's assistants. Before Penny could respond, Victoria pushed open the doors. Your new assistant, Mr. Roberts. Maxwell was standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out over the city. He turned as they entered, his expression unreadable as he took in Penny's appearance. Thank you, Victoria, he said dismissively. That will be all. Victoria's jaw tightened, but she nodded curtly and left, closing the doors behind her. Good morning, Ms. Garcia, Maxwell said formally, as though they were meeting for the first time. Mr. Roberts, Penny replied, matching his tone. For a moment they simply regarded each other. Then Maxwell's expression softened slightly. You look nervous. Wouldn't you be? Everyone out there is looking at me like I am some kind of intruder. They are, Maxwell acknowledged, and in a way you are. You don't fit the Goldcrest mold. Is that why you hired me? Partly. He gestured to a sleek desk positioned just outside a door that presumably led to his private office. That will be your workspace. Everything you need should be there. Computer, phone, keycards. Penny nodded, trying to take it all in. What exactly will I be doing? Managing my schedule, coordinating with department heads, handling sensitive correspondence. He paused. And helping me with a personal project. What kind of personal project? Maxwell hesitated. Let us get you settled first. I'll discuss that later. The next few hours were a blur of introductions, paperwork, and system access setups. By lunchtime, Penny's head was spinning with new information, passwords, and protocols. Maxwell had been called into an emergency meeting, leaving her to figure things out largely on her own. She was just trying to make sense of Maxwell's Byzantine calendar when a young man approached her desk. You must be the new assistant everyone's talking about, he said with a friendly smile. I am Daniel Chen, head of digital analytics. Penny Garcia, she replied, grateful for a face that wasn't scowling at her. And yes, apparently I am the talk of the town. Don't let it get to you, Daniel said, perching on the edge of her desk. This place runs on gossip and intimidation. It's practically in the employee handbook. Penny laughed despite herself. Good to know. So, Daniel lowered his voice. Is it true you met Max by jumping into his car? Penny's eyes widened. How did you— Like I said, gossip. Daniel grinned. Don't worry, I'm not here to judge. Actually, I am here to invite you to lunch. New employees, tradition. She hesitated. I should probably stay in case Mr. Roberts returns. He'll be in that meeting for hours, Daniel assured her. It is the quarterly review with the board. Come on, you need allies in this place. Penny decided he was right. She grabbed her purse and followed Daniel to the elevator. The cafe in the building S atrium was busy, but not crowded. As they found a table, Daniel explained the complex social hierarchy of Goldcrest. Victoria has been with the company almost as long as Maxwell, and he explained. She thinks she is next in line for the throne, so to speak. That is why she is so threatened by you. By me? Penny asked incredulously. I'm just an assistant. Daniel gave her a knowing look. No one is just anything to Maxwell Roberts. If he hired you personally, he has a reason. Before Penny could probe further, Daniel's phone buzzed. He checked it and frowned. I need to take this. Back in a sec. Left alone, Penny found herself observing the Goldcrest employees around her. They all had a certain look. Polished, confident, ambitious. She stuck out like a wildflower in a garden of carefully cultivated roses. Ms. Garcia, she turned to find an older man standing beside her table, distinguished with silver hair and kind eyes behind expensive glasses. Yes? Edward Hastings, he introduced himself. I am the CFO here at Goldcrest. Oh! Penny started to rise, but he waved her back down. Please stay seated, I just wanted to welcome you. His smile seemed genuine. Maxwell mentioned he'd hired someone new. He speaks highly of you. He does? Penny couldn't hide her surprise. Indeed, though I must say you are not what I expected. I get that a lot, Penny said dryly. Edward chuckled. I meant it as a compliment. This place could use some fresh perspective. He glanced around, then lowered his voice. Has Maxwell told you about the Richardson account yet? No, Penny replied, puzzled. Should he have? Something flickered in Edward's eyes. Ah, well, I am sure he will in due time. It was nice meeting you, Miss Garcia. As Edward walked away, Daniel returned to the table. Was that Hastings talking to you? Yes, Penny said. He mentioned something called the Richardson account. What is that? Daniel's expression turned serious. Where did you hear that name? Edward just mentioned it. Why? What is wrong? Nothing, Daniel said quickly. It is just— Richardson is a sensitive subject around here. It goes back a few years before my time even. What happened? Daniel looked uncomfortable. Look, it is not really my place to say, just if Maxwell hasn't brought it up yet, maybe don't mention it either. By the time Penny returned to her desk, her curiosity was thoroughly piqued, but she didn't have time to dwell on it. Maxwell had left her a stack of tasks to complete, and she spent the rest of the afternoon racing to catch up. It was past 8 in the evening when Maxwell finally emerged from his office, looking tired but composed. You're still here, he observed. You didn't tell me what time I could leave, Penny replied, stifling a yawn. A reasonable person would have gone home hours ago. I'm not sure reasonable is part of the job description. That earned her a small smile. How was your first day? Interesting, Penny said carefully. I met Edward Hastings. Maxwell's expression didn't change, but something in his posture tensed. Did you? What did Edward have to say? Penny decided to be direct. He mentioned something called the Richardson account. Then Daniel Chen acted strange when I asked about it. Maxwell was silent for a long moment. The Richardson account is not something you need to concern yourself with. It seemed important. It's in the past. Then why did Edward bring it up? Maxwell's jaw tightened. Edward has his own agenda, as does Victoria, as does everyone at Goldcrest. Including you? Their eyes met, and for a moment Penny glimpsed something vulnerable behind Maxwell's controlled exterior. Especially me, he finally said. Go home, Ms. Garcia, get some rest. Tomorrow will be just as demanding. Penny knew she was being dismissed, but something made her push. Our agreement was transparency, Mr. Roberts, and I will honor that, Maxwell replied. But some things require context and trust. We're not there yet. Over the next few weeks, Penny settled into a rhythm at Goldcrest. The whispers and stares gradually subsided as she proved herself capable and efficient. She learned to navigate the complex politics of the executive floor, keeping Victoria at arm's length while cultivating a friendly relationship with Daniel and his team. Maxwell remained an enigma, professional and reserved during work hours, occasionally revealing glimpses of the more relaxed man she'd met at Lorenzo's restaurant. He was demanding but fair, and Penny found herself rising to meet his high expectations. The personal project he had mentioned on her first day turned out to be a comprehensive review of Goldcrest's charitable foundation, analyzing which initiatives were actually making an impact versus those that were primarily for show. "Why me?" Penny had asked when he finally explained the assignment. "Surely you have teams of analysts who could do this." "Teams with vested interests in the current structure," Maxwell had replied. "I need fresh eyes, someone who can see beyond the Goldcrest facade." It was interesting work, and Penny threw herself into it, often staying late to pore over grant reports and impact assessments. It was during one of these late nights that everything changed. She'd been digging through archived foundation records when she came across a folder labeled Richardson Foundation, Terminated. Remembering Edward's comment from her first day, Penny hesitated only briefly before opening it. Inside was a proposal from several years back, a partnership between Goldcrest and the Richardson Family Foundation to build low-income housing in neighborhoods being gentrified by Goldcrest's commercial developments. The proposal had detailed notes in Maxwell's handwriting, mostly positive, but the final page had a single notation, terminated due to conflict of interest, MR. The date corresponded with a major upswing in Goldcrest's stock price. "Did I find something interesting?" Penny jumped, her heart racing as she looked up to find Maxwell standing in the doorway of the conference room she'd commandeered for her research. "I didn't hear you come in," she said, trying to discreetly close the folder. "Clearly." He approached the table, glancing down at the papers spread before her. His expression darkened when he saw the Richardson folder. "Where did you get that?" "Son, it was in the archives with the other foundation materials," Penny replied, holding her ground. "You asked me to be thorough. That project was terminated years ago." "So I see." Penny met his gaze steadily. "What was the conflict of interest, Mr. Roberts?" Maxwell's jaw tightened. "It was complicated. I am intelligent enough to understand complications." For a moment, she thought he might dismiss her again. Instead, he sank into the chair across from her, suddenly looking weary. "The Richardson proposal would have required Goldcrest to scale back certain commercial developments," he said quietly. "It would have reduced our projected profits significantly." "So you terminated it for financial reasons?" "The board terminated it," Maxwell corrected, "against my recommendation." Penny raised an eyebrow. "You are the CEO. Even CEOs answer to someone, Ms. Garcia." He rubbed his temples. "The board was unanimous. The Richardson partnership was too risky, too costly. But you disagreed." Maxwell looked at her with something like surprise. "How did you know that?" "Your notes," Penny said, tapping the folder. "They were all positive, and you don't strike me as someone who would support something and then kill it for money." A shadow crossed his face. "You give me too much credit. Or maybe others, Don T, give you enough." Penny leaned forward. "Mr. Roberts, Maxwell, what really happened with the Richardson account?" The use of his first name seemed to catch him off guard. He was silent for a long moment, studying her with an intensity that made her heart beat faster. "Thomas Richardson was an old friend," he finally said. "We grew up together, went to school together. His family foundation was doing good work in communities that Goldcrest was affecting with its developments, and you wanted to help." Maxwell nodded. The partnership made sense, ethically and practically. Yes, it would have cut into profits, but it would have created tremendous goodwill. More importantly, it would have been the right thing to do. "So what changed?" "Politics, pressure." His expression hardened. "Victoria discovered that Thomas had connections to a rival investment firm. She convinced the board it was a Trojan horse, that the partnership would give our competitors access to insider information." "Was it true?" "No," Maxwell said firmly. Thomas wasn't out like that, but the board wouldn't out listen. They forced me to terminate the agreement. And Thomas, he never spoke to me again. Maxwell's voice was quiet. He died a year later. Heart attack. Penny felt a pang of sympathy. I'm sorry. The point, Ms. Garcia, is that Goldcrest operates in a certain way. The board has certain expectations, profit above all else. Is that why you hired me for this foundation review, to find a way to change that? Maxwell looked surprised, then impressed. You really are perceptive. So I am right, partially. He leaned back in his chair. The truth is, I've spent years building Goldcrest into what it is today. I've made compromises, sacrificed relationships, all for the sake of success. And now you're having second thoughts. Let us just say I am reassessing what success means. His blue eyes met hers. The day you jumped into my car, it was the anniversary of Thomas's death. I was on my way to visit his grave. The revelation hung in the air between them. You think it was coincidence? Penny asked softly. I don't know what it was, but when you spoke about your mother, about choosing her care over your career, it reminded me of choices I should have made differently. In that moment, something shifted between them. The professional distance that had defined their relationship these past weeks seemed to dissolve, revealing two people connected by something deeper than a job title. So what happens now? Penny asked. Maxwell glanced at the Richardson folder. Now we find a way to honor Thomas's vision while keeping the board happy. Is that possible? With the right approach, the right person advocating for it. He gave her a meaningful look. Someone who isn't afraid to tell the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. The board meeting was scheduled for 2 in the afternoon. Penny had spent days helping Maxwell prepare the presentation, refining the proposal until it was airtight. They were proposing a new direction for the Goldcrest Foundation, one that would honor the original vision of the Richardson partnership while still delivering the returns the board expected. Are you nervous? Daniel asked, as they rode the elevator up to the executive floor that morning. Terrified, Penny admitted. This is way above my pay grade. Not according to the rumors. Daniel gave her a knowing look. Word is, Maxwell's grooming you for bigger things. Don't believe everything you hear, Penny said, though her cheeks flushed slightly. The truth was, something had changed between her and Maxwell since that night in the conference room. Their late-night strategy sessions had often drifted into more personal conversations. She told him about her dreams of starting a small business someday, a combination cafe and art gallery where she could showcase her photography. He'd shared stories of his early struggles, the pressure he faced from his father, to succeed at any cost. There was an undeniable connection growing between them, one that went beyond professional respect. But neither had acknowledged it directly. When Penny arrived at her desk, Victoria was waiting, a thin smile on her perfect lips. Miss Garcia, ready for the big presentation? As ready as we can be, Penny replied carefully. Victoria laughed softly. You know, when you first arrived, I was certain you wouldn't outlast a month. Now I see what Max was doing. What do you mean? He was looking for someone malleable, someone he could mold to support his softer approach. Victoria's eyes narrowed. The board want to go for it, you know. They never do. They'll shut this little philanthropic fantasy down just like they did with Richardson. Maybe, Penny acknowledged, but we have to try. Victoria raised an eyebrow. You've gotten comfortable quickly. Before Penny could respond, Edward Hastings approached, his expression grave. Have you seen Maxwell this morning? He asked Penny. Not yet. Is something wrong? Edward and Victoria exchanged looks. The chairman of the board called an emergency pre-meeting, Edward explained, without Maxwell. That is not good, Victoria said, not bothering to hide her satisfaction. Penny felt a sinking feeling in her stomach. When is Maxwell supposed to arrive? Any minute, Edward replied. As if on cue, the elevator doors opened and Maxwell stepped out. Even from a distance, Penny could see the tension in his shoulders, the determination in his stride. Good morning, he said as he approached. Edward, Victoria, I believe the chairman wants to see you before the main meeting." They nodded and moved away, Victoria casting one last meaningful look at Penny. "Everything okay?" Penny asked once they were alone. "The chairman got wind of our proposal," Maxwell said quietly. "He is not happy." "What does that mean for the presentation?" "It means we proceed exactly as planned." His blue eyes met hers. "I've spent too long compromising on what matters, Penny. Not today." The use of her first name here in the office emphasized the weight of the moment. "Whatever happens in there," Maxwell continued, "I want you to know that working with you these past weeks has been illuminating." Penny's heart beat faster. "For me too." Something unspoken passed between them, a recognition of feelings that had been building, carefully contained but undeniably present. "Mr. Roberts," his assistant called, "they re-ready for you." Maxwell straightened, professionalism falling back into place like a mask. "Let ESCO change some minds, Ms. Garcia." The boardroom was imposing, all dark wood and leather chairs, with views of the city from every angle. The board members were already seated when Maxwell and Penny entered, their expressions ranging from curious to openly hostile. The chairman, an older man with sharp eyes and a permanent frown, spoke first. "Maxwell, I understand you re-proposing significant changes to our foundation structure." "Not changes," Maxwell replied smoothly. "Evolution. An approach that honors our commitment to the communities where we operate while still delivering the returns this board expects." "And you brought your assistant to explain this evolution?" Victoria asked from her seat at the table. "Ms. Garcia has been instrumental in developing this proposal," Maxwell said firmly. "Her perspective has been invaluable." For the next hour they presented their vision, a foundation that would partner with community organizations, invest in sustainable housing initiatives, and create goodwill that would ultimately benefit Goldcrest's bottom line. Penny spoke about the data she gathered, the success stories from other companies that had taken similar approaches. "This all sounds very noble," the chairman finally said when they finished, "but the numbers don't support the investment required." "With respect, sir, they do," Penny countered, pointing to the financial projections. "The initial outlay is substantial, yes, but the long-term benefits—" "Ms. Garcia," Victoria interrupted, "while we appreciate your enthusiasm, the reality of our business is more complex than what you were presenting." "Actually," Edward surprised everyone by speaking up, "I have reviewed these projections independently. They resound conservative even." The chairman frowned. "Edward, you can seriously be supporting this." "I am supporting what's best for Goldcrest," Edward replied calmly, "and I believe this is it." The debate continued, growing heated at times. Maxwell remained composed, addressing each concern with patience and clarity. Penny watched him with growing admiration. This was the leader he was meant to be, not the cold executive she'd first met. Finally, the chairman called for a vote. As hands rose around the table, Penny held her breath. It was close, too close to call visually. The chairman tallied the votes, his expression revealing nothing. "By a margin of 1 vote," he announced, "the proposal is approved, conditionally. We'll reevaluate in 6 months." Relief washed over Penny. They'd done it. The Richardson vision would finally be realized, even if Thomas himself wasn't out there to see it. As the board members filed out, Maxwell stayed seated, his expression unreadable. When the room was empty except for them, he finally spoke. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what?" "For jumping into my car that day." A small smile touched his lips. "For reminding me who I wanted to be." Penny felt a warmth spread through her chest. "I just told the truth. That was our deal, remember?" "I remember everything about you, Penny Garcia." Maxwell's voice was low, intimate. "Your honesty, your determination, the way you put others before yourself." He rose from his chair, moving to stand beside her. "I've been thinking about what you said, about your dream of opening that cafe gallery someday." "A pipe dream," Penny said, though the thought still made her heart race. "It doesn't have to be." Maxwell hesitated, then continued. "I'd like to help make it happen." Penny stiffened. I don't want charity, Maxwell. Not charity. Investment. Partnership. He met her gaze directly. I've spent my life building things that make money. I'd like to help build something that makes a difference, something that matters to someone who matters to me. The implication hung in the air between them. And what about Goldcrest? And Penny asked. Your position here? I'll stay on as CEO, but with a clearer vision of what I want this company to be. He stepped closer. The question is, will you stay? Not as my assistant, but as the Foundation's new director. Penny's eyes widened. Me? But I don't have the experience. You have exactly the experience needed. Life experience, perspective, integrity. His voice softened. And if you accept, it means we could continue working together, but as equals. Equals, Penny repeated, understanding what he was really saying. For weeks they'd been dancing around the connection between them, keeping it professional despite the growing attraction. This would change everything. I should probably tell you, Maxwell said with a hint of his dry humor, that dating the CEO might be even more scandalous than being his assistant. Penny laughed, the tension breaking. I think I can handle scandal. Is that a yes to the Foundation position? It is a yes to all of it, Penny replied softly. The Foundation, the cafe investment, and whatever this is between us. Maxwell reached for her hand, his fingers entwining with hers. I believe the traditional term is relationship. How very conventional of you, Mr. Roberts. His smile, a real, genuine smile that reached his eyes, was the most beautiful thing Penny had ever seen. Only in some ways, Miss Garcia. Only in some ways. 6 months later, Penny stood in the center of what would soon be her cafe gallery, watching as workers installed the lighting fixtures. Sunlight streamed through the large windows, illuminating the space that had once been just a dream. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. Don't forget dinner tonight. Maxwell promised to bring that tiramisu I love. Penny smiled. Her mother's health had improved dramatically once she had access to better care. Another life changed by that rainy morning and an accidental car ride. The Foundation was thriving under her direction, with the Richardson Housing Initiative as its flagship program. Even Victoria had grudgingly admitted the positive impact it was having on Goldcrest's public image. And Maxwell was changing too. The cold, calculating CEO was still there when needed, but more often now the world saw the man Penny had discovered, thoughtful, driven by more than just profit, capable of tremendous warmth. Their relationship had raised eyebrows at first, but as with everything else, they navigated it with honesty and determination. They were partners in every sense, challenging each other, supporting each other, building something meaningful together. Surveying your kingdom, Penny turned to find Maxwell standing in the doorway, looking more relaxed than she'd ever seen him in the early days. Hardly a kingdom, she replied with a smile, but it is mine, ours. He crossed to her, wrapping his arms around her waist from behind. The contractors say you will be ready to open next month, just in time for the Foundation's Community Art Initiative launch. Penny leaned back against him. Perfect timing. Speaking of timing, Maxwell turned her to face him. There is something I've been wanting to ask you. Penny raised an eyebrow. That sounds ominous. Not ominous, just important. He took a small box from his pocket. I had this whole elaborate plan involving Lorenzo's restaurant and that corner booth where we first had lunch. But standing here, in this place that represents everything we've built together, it felt right to ask now. As he opened the box to reveal a simple but elegant diamond ring, Penny's breath caught. Penny Garcia, you jumped into my car and changed my life. Would you consider making that change permanent? Tears welled in Penny's eyes as she nodded. Yes, absolutely yes. As Maxwell slipped the ring onto her finger, Penny marveled at the journey that had brought them here, from a rainy morning and a case of mistaken identity to a love that had transformed them both. You know, she said as she admired the ring, if that had actually been my Uber that day, none of this would have happened. Maxwell laughed, pulling her close. Then thank goodness for happy accidents. And second chances, Penny added softly. And honesty, Maxwell said, his blue eyes serious as they met hers. always honesty. As they stood together in the space that represented their future, surrounded by the promise of what they had built and what was yet to come, Penny knew that the greatest journey of all had been the one from strangers to partners, an unexpected ride that had led them exactly where they were meant to be. Wow, I told you that ending would be unexpected. If you enjoyed this story, please give this video a thumbs up and share your reactions in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to Hearts of Crime for more captivating stories, just like this one every single day. Click on the video appearing on your screen right now for another incredible tale of love in the criminal underworld. Thank you for watching until the end. May God bless you and your family, and I'll see you in the next video.